Today we'll be at the Carter Presidential Center, which includes the Carter Museum. I read that Jimmy Carter almost never used the Oval Office. It was too intimidating to people who were meeting him. He used a smaller office off to the side. He wanted people to be at ease. Now that's a good legacy. This is a nutcracker carved by Christoph Wagner of West Germany. Just a few of the gifts given to the Carters during their presidency. Technically property of the United States, if I remember correctly. Continuing this rainy day odyssey, we will go to the Cyclorama, where they present the Battle of Atlanta during the Civil War. Theater in the round. Well, it's not a theater, but it's a presentation. We'll see if they let us take pictures. The Atlantic Cyclorama houses the Battle of Atlanta, a 42-high cylindrical oil painting. We will have a film on the Atlanta campaign. Then you will be seated in a revolving theater to view and listen to the sounds of the battle. Do you remember that film called The Great Locomotive Chase, where the Union soldiers stole a Confederate train, and it was called the General, and it was chased down by the Confederates in a locomotive called the Texas? Well, this is the Texas. The film depicted an actual event in the Civil War. One of the things that helped win the war for the Union was the rifling in the pistols and rifles. It gave them much greater accuracy. The Cyclorama was too dark. The pictures wouldn't take on the inside. Mainly it's a revolving tier of seats. I think it'll hold somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 or so people. It's a painting which, if laid down flat, would cover a football field plus a little bit more. It's 40 feet tall, and it's hung in a circle. And this tier of seats revolves inside this building, inside this painting. And you come up through the floor, so to speak. You come up from below, and then you seat. And then as the show is presented, you rotate around, taking a look at various parts of this painting. And they have other scenes built up in the middle of it to kind of give it a nice effect. It's certainly very impressive. It was painted, I think, over 100 years ago, back in the 1800s, yeah. It's worth $25 million, so it's quite an impressive sight to see at least once. It's the second time that I've been to it. Went there back in the mid-90s. And it was worth a trip back for me, and I'm sure you'd be impressed if you took a look at it. Today we'll visit the Martin Luther King National Historic Site. This is the Visitors Center. Scenes and events in King's life. This is a National Park Service facility. It's a presentation on the life of Martin Luther King. This display commemorates his youth and eventual rise to leadership in the church. The caisson used to haul Dr. King's casket is pulled by two mules. A recreation of the march in Selma. This is Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Dr. King was raised and became the pastor of. Directly across the street is the church as it exists today. They've done well. Remember that scene in the series Roots, where the new father in Africa holds the child Kinte up for his baptism? Behold, the only thing greater than you. This is the tomb of Martin Luther King and his wife. It's not very far from the home where he lived when he was a child. And an eternal flame symbolizing the continuing effort to achieve Dr. King's ideals. This is the block where Dr. King was born and raised. The houses have been restored and either used as Park Service offices or some are private residences. This is his birthplace home, completely restored of course, and you can have tours on the inside. A nice middle-class home in a middle-class neighborhood. He lived a good life in his own neighborhood. It was only when he left the area that he of course ran into the segregation of the South that molded his life. From age 6 onward was his first memory of being kept separate. Apparently he was actually born in the home. Now here's a single family dwelling that hasn't been restored. Been just recently transferred to the National Park Service, so presumably they'll be getting at it. The problem I have with restoring all of this stuff is that this isn't how it was when Martin Luther King lived here. They weren't all brand new, nicely painted, no termite damage. It's kind of like those movies in the 50s where all the cars in the street look brand new, but they cover like 10 years in age. I guess I'm one of those guys that just can't be pleased. Now some of you might not recognize this car. That's because it doesn't have a taxi sign on the top. This is a checker car, made checker cabs. After driving one of these in the Air Force, when I was in the Air Force, I drove one part-time in Amarillo, Texas. I was so impressed with how tough these cars are that I was very tempted to buy one when I had a young family. It has a large back seat, a large trunk, it's easy to drive, stick shift on the floor, the one I drove anyway. They lasted forever, you couldn't hurt them. They were made for what they were doing, getting beat up in the taxi business. So if you need a car that's going to last you for the rest of your life, buy one of these things. I think they still make them. And you can see the huge trunk space. The Checker Motor Company was established in 1922. They started building the what we think of as a checker cab. They stopped making them in 1982. It just got too difficult to get the special parts for them, and they couldn't compete with the fleet discounts that regular automobile manufacturers were starting to give to taxi companies who purchased large quantities of vehicles. Now the taxi cab companies liked these vehicles because they were so heavy duty. Which is what I liked them. That was what was so impressive for me, and that's why I wanted to purchase one. But they're expensive. Now it was worth it as a business decision to buy one, but as a personal car, I just didn't have the money back then. But it was one hell of a car, and I was certainly surprised to see it sitting on the street there, so nondescript.